You know the story, right? The brilliant entrepreneur, the genius musician, the star athlete, the person who is completely self-made. Well, in his amazing book, Outliers, Malcolm Gladwell basically asks us to hit pause and take a much closer look. So let's get into it. What if that whole story we tell ourselves about success, that it's all about individual talent and just pure grit, is just wrong? That's the big provocative question at the very heart of what we're exploring today. We're going to unpack the hidden architecture of success, just like Gladwell does. Okay, so first things first, we have to talk about the myth itself. Gladwell's whole argument is that if you really want to understand successful people, you have to stop looking at them and start looking at the world around them. Look, we all love the idea that success is a super simple formula. You just add talent and hard work, and poof, you're a success. And sure, those things absolutely matter. But what Gladwell suggests is that they're really just the tip of the iceberg. There's a much bigger, more complicated picture hiding underneath. And this brings us right to Gladwell's core idea, the incredible, game-changing power of opportunity. He argues that what makes someone extraordinary isn't really what they're like on the inside, but has way more to do with where they come from and the chances they get along the way. You see, success is rarely random. It's often the product of all these hidden variables. Things like being born in just the right decade to catch a massive tech wave, or growing up in a family that just happens to foster a very specific skill, or being part of a culture that deeply values a certain type of work. Seriously, just think about it for a second. Bill Gates, he got super rare access to a university computer way back in middle school in the 1960s. The Beatles, they got to hone their craft by playing these insane 8-hour gigs night after night in Hamburg. Gladwell shows us that outliers are almost always the ones who got these kinds of extraordinary opportunities. And then there's this other crucial piece of the puzzle he calls cultural legacy. It's fascinating. For instance, he talks about the children and grandchildren of Jewish immigrants who came to New York and worked in the garment industry. They didn't just inherit sewing skills. They inherited a culture of really meaningful, complex work. And that culture perfectly set up their kids to become incredible lawyers and doctors. So the big point here is that our backgrounds, our histories, the legacies of our parents and grandparents, they all play a huge role in the opportunities we get and the skills we end up developing. It's all connected. But okay, even if you get all the right opportunities, success isn't just going to fall into your lap. And this leads us to what is probably the most famous idea from this book, the absolutely critical role of practice. Yep, there it is, the magic number. After looking at studies of everyone from world-class chess players to the greatest composers in history, Gladwell points to 10,000 hours as the real tipping point for becoming a true expert in something. And this is so key. Yeah, talent helps, for sure, but there's a point where just sheer, focused, relentless preparation can actually take over and become even more important. But you gotta remember, the opportunity to even get those 10,000 hours is often a result of luck and timing. See how these two ideas work hand in hand? And listen, it can't just be any old practice. To put in that kind of time, the work has to feel meaningful to you. You have to feel like you have some control, you need to see a clear link between how hard you work and the reward you get, and it's got to be complex enough to keep your brain firing on all cylinders. Okay, so we've got talent, we've got thousands of hours of practice, but that's still not the whole story. Gladwell argues there's another kind of intelligence that we often totally overlook, but it's just as important. Gladwell draws this really important line between two types of intelligence. On one hand, you have analytical intelligence, your IQ, what we call book smarts. But then there's practical intelligence, which is basically street smarts. It's social savvy. It's knowing exactly what to say, who to say it to, and how to say it to get what you want. This is a perfect example. I love this story. So at a soap factory, a bunch of engineers, all with super high analytical intelligence, designed this really complicated, expensive X-ray machine to find empty soap boxes on the assembly line. But a worker with high practical intelligence had a much better idea. Just point a huge fan at the line. The empty boxes, they just blew right off. Problem solved. And here's the real takeaway. Once your IQ gets past a certain point, having more of it doesn't really make you any more successful. Practical intelligence, though, that's what lets you convince people to give you a shot, to negotiate for what you need, and to turn your raw talent into actual real-world success. It's a game changer. So how do all these things, talent, culture, practice, street smarts, how do they all fit together to create one of these outliers? Well, Gladwell calls it the architecture of success. The secret ingredient that ties this all together is a concept from sociology called accumulative advantage. It's basically the idea that a small, early advantage, like being born in the right month or having the right family background, doesn't just give you a little head start. It creates a snowball effect that gets bigger and bigger over time. Let's just walk through how it works. You get one small break. Maybe you're the oldest kid on the hockey team because of the age cutoff. Because you're a little bigger, you get better coaching. That better coaching helps you practice more effectively. That leads to more success, which then opens the door to even bigger and better opportunities. You see, each step just builds on the one before it. So it's not just one thing. As Gladwell says himself, success is really this cascade of advantages, one thing triggering the next, that in the end separates the true outliers from pretty much everyone else. So in the end, when we look at an outlier, we're not just seeing one talented person. We're seeing the product of a very specific time and a specific place. We're seeing a cultural legacy, a whole series of lucky breaks, and an incredible amount of hard work that those breaks made possible in the first place. And that leaves us with a really powerful question to think about. When you look back at your own life, it's not just about your personal efforts or your talent. What were the lucky breaks, the cultural gifts? What were the hidden opportunities that have helped shape your path? It's an amazing new lens for seeing not just outliers, but for understanding ourselves too.